Italy, a country where entire civilizations rose, flourished, and left their mark in stone. From the ruins of Rome to the quiet villages perched above the Mediterranean, this is a place where history is not confined to museums. It surrounds daily life. Roads still follow ancient routes. Cities grew from medieval walls. Recipes passed down through generations are served in the same neighborhoods where they began. In a single journey, you can stand inside a Roman amphitheater, walk through Renaissance streets, cross alpine valleys, and watch the sun set over coastal towns built into sheer cliffs. Italy is not defined by one landscape or one era. It is a collection of regions, each with its own character, its own traditions, and its own rhythm of life. This journey begins in Rome and circles the country, south to volcanic shores, north to mountain peaks, west to historic ports, and back again, tracing the shape of a nation that influenced the world far beyond its borders. This is Italy, the country that shaped civilization, and this is the road that reveals it. Rome. In Rome, history breathes. You feel it the moment you step into the historic center. Cobblestone streets echo under your shoes. Warm stone buildings glow amber in the late afternoon light. Church bells ring somewhere in the distance, blending with the hum of scooters and the steady murmur of conversation spilling out of cafes. Rome was once the center of an empire that stretched across continents. And somehow, it still feels like the center of something. The Colosseum rises unexpectedly from modern streets. Its arches weathered but powerful. Standing beneath it, you realize this wasn't built as a monument. It was built as entertainment. 50,000 spectators once filled these seats. The scale is staggering. A short walk away lies the Roman Forum, where columns stand like broken teeth against the sky. This was the heart of political life in ancient Rome. Senators debated here. Laws were passed here. Decisions were made here that shaped Europe, North Africa, and beyond. Climb the steps of Palatine Hill, and the view opens wide. Ruins below, the city stretching outwards in every direction. According to legend, this is where Rome began. But Rome is ancient and layered. Walk toward the heart of the city, and you'll reach Piazza Navona, built over the remains of a Roman stadium. Street artists set up easels. Musicians play beneath Baroque facades. At its center, Bernini's Fountain of the Four Rivers surges with sculpted movement, its marble figures representing the great rivers of the world. Not far away, the Pantheon stands almost impossibly intact. Its massive dome remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome ever built. Step inside and light pours through the oculus, a single circular opening to the sky. When it rains, water falls directly onto the marble floor and drains away quietly. Nearly 2,000 years later, it still functions exactly as designed. Then there is the ritual of the Trevi Fountain. You hear it before you see it. The sound of rushing water bouncing off stone walls. Crowds gather shoulder to shoulder. Coins flash through the air, tossed over shoulders into turquoise water. 1 coin means you'll return to Rome. 2 means you'll fall in love. 3, well, maybe best not to test that one. In the early evening, walk up the Spanish steps at Piazza di Spagna. The staircase fills with people, locals, travelers, couples sharing gelato. At the top, the view stretches across rooftops and domes. The city feels endless. Cross the Tiber River, and the atmosphere shifts. Inside Vatican City, scale takes on new meaning. St. Peter's Basilica rises with astonishing size and symmetry. Stand beneath its dome and you feel small, intentionally so. This is architecture designed to inspire awe. But Rome is not only grandeur. It is neighborhoods like Trastevere, where ivy hangs from faded buildings and dinner tables spill into narrow streets. It is morning espresso taken standing at a marble counter. It is laundry strung between windows. It is the scent of fresh bread drifting from small bakeries before noon. It is also quieter places. At sunset, the light softens the stone. Domes glow pink. The sky fades to lavender behind silhouettes of ancient ruins. Rome becomes cinematic without trying. And at night, it transforms again. The Colosseum glows under golden lights. Fountains shimmer. Piazzas empty slowly, but never completely. Rome doesn't shut down. It hums. It may seem as though Rome were an immovable force. The fact is, it has proven quite amenable to change. Ancient temples became churches. Pagan columns were reused in Christian basilicas. Renaissance artists built atop imperial foundations. Modern life weaves through it all. Few cities in the world carry this much visible history in one place. And yet, for all its weight, Rome feels alive, imperfect, loud, beautiful, chaotic, confident. It is not a museum. It is a living capital layered on top of 2,000 years of ambition. And as you leave the city heading south, past crumbling aqueducts that once carried water across the countryside, you realize something. Rome is not just where the journey begins. It's the standard by which the rest of the country will be measured. Naples. If Rome feels grand and layered, Naples feels immediate. The city sits along a wide bay, its neighborhoods climbing the hills in the dense layers of color and stone. From the waterfront, the outline of Mount Vesuvius dominates the horizon, calm most days but always present. Naples moves quickly. Scooters weave through traffic with practiced precision. Vendors call out from small storefronts. Balconies overflow with plants and drying laundry. Life happens outdoors here, in full view. The historic center is a maze of narrow streets where sunlight reaches the pavement only in thin slices. Churches appear suddenly between apartment buildings, their interiors filled with marble, gold, and centuries of devotion. Small shrines glow behind glass at street corners. The smell of coffee drifts constantly from cafes that have been serving the neighborhood for generations. Food anchors daily life in Naples. This is where pizza took its modern form. Soft, blistered crust, simple tomato sauce, fresh mozzarella, basil. In pizzerias across the city, wood-fired ovens burn from morning until late at night. Meals are unhurried, loud, and communal. Along the waterfront, the air changes. The Bay of Naples opens wide, ferries moving steadily toward islands in the distance. Castel dell'Ovo sits low against the water, its stone walls catching the afternoon light. People walk the promenade in the evening, pausing to watch the sky turn from blue to amber behind the volcano. Just outside the city, history takes a different form. In Pompeii, streets and homes remain frozen in the moment, when ash from Vesuvius covered everything. Walking through the ruins, you see bakeries, courtyards, painted walls, even the ruts left by cartwheels and stone roads. Daily life from 2,000 years ago sits exposed under open sky. Nearby, Herculaneum offers another perspective. Preserved buildings, wooden structures, and mosaics that survived beneath layers of volcanic material. Back in Naples, modern life continues without pause. Markets sell seafood pulled from the bay that morning. Street musicians perform in small squares. Children play soccer in tight alleyways where cars barely fit. The city carries a reputation for chaos, but there is rhythm in it, and understanding among residents about how everything flows. Crossing a busy street becomes second nature. Ordering coffee becomes a quick exchange of familiar gestures. As evening settles, Lights begin to flicker on across the hillsides, reflecting in the water below. Restaurants fill with conversation. Plates arrive in steady succession. Dessert appears late, followed by espresso. Naples feels deeply rooted in place, shaped by the sea, the volcano, and a long history of trade and survival. And as the road begins to wind south along the coast, the city slowly gives way to cliffs, open water, and one of the most scenic drives in the country. The Amalfi Coast follows the edge of steep cliffs that drop sharply into the Mediterranean. The road itself feels improbably narrow, carved into rock, turning constantly as it threads between mountain and sea. Around each bend, the view opens wider. Terraces of lemon groves, clusters of pastel buildings, flashes of deep blue water far below. In Positano, houses cascade down the hillside toward a small beach, stacked so tightly they appear almost poured into place. Narrow stairways replace streets in many parts of town, connecting boutiques, cafes, and quiet corners overlooking the water. From the shoreline, the town rises like a vertical mosaic of warm colors. Further along, Amalfi sits at the mouth of a deep valley, its cathedral steps leading upward from the central square. Boats come and go from the harbor, and the sound of waves carries into the streets. High above the coast, Ravello looks outward from the cliffs rather than down at them. Gardens spill over stone terraces, framing views that stretch across the coastline. The air feels quieter here, cooler, with fewer crowds and more space between buildings. Throughout the region, lemon trees grow in carefully tended terraces. Their fruit used for everything from desserts to the region's famous limoncello. Small villages cling to slopes where flat land barely exists, connected by staircases and narrow lanes. As the sun lowers, the cliffs take on warm tones of gold and orange. Fishing boats return to their harbors. Lights begin to appear on the hillsides, scattered like constellations. The Amalfi Coast feels suspended between land and sea, dramatic, luminous, and unmistakably Mediterranean. From here, the journey turns toward open water. Off the southern edge of the mainland lies Sicily, separated from Italy by a narrow strait, but distinct in character. The island has been shaped by centuries of outside influence: Greek, Roman, Arab, Norman, Spanish, each leaving traces in architecture, language, and food. ancient temples stand in open countryside, their columns still intact against the sky. Baroque towns glow pale gold in the sunlight. In Palermo, markets fill entire streets with color and sound. Vendors call out prices over displays of seafood, citrus, olives, and spices. Layers of history sit side by side. Arab domes, Norman palaces, grand theaters from later centuries. Along the eastern coast, Taormina overlooks the sea from a rocky terrace. Its ancient Greek theater frames a distant view of Mount Etna, which rises above the landscape with a quiet, constant presence. At night, faint glows sometimes appear near the summit. Beaches vary from long, sandy stretches to dark volcanic shorelines. Inland, farmland and small villages fill the hills, where life moves at a slower pace, tied closely to seasons and harvests. Sicily feels expansive and sunlit, shaped by both isolation and connection to the wider Mediterranean world. Distances are long, landscapes broad, and the sense of independence strong. When the ferry returns to the mainland, Italy feels familiar again, but the road ahead leads into one of its least crowded regions. The southeastern curve of Italy's boot is known as Apulia, a landscape of wide horizons, olive groves, and coastal towns facing the Adriatic. In Brindisi, the harbor has served as a departure point for travelers and traders for thousands of years. Roman columns mark the historic end of the Via Appia, once connecting Rome to the eastern Mediterranean. Today, ferries still depart toward Greece and beyond. Further south, Lecce reveals a different architectural style. Elaborate Baroque facades carved from warm local stone that glows in the sun. Churches and palaces fill the historic center, their details visible even from a distance. Across the region, olive trees stretch in every direction, some centuries old with thick, twisting trunks. Whitewashed farmhouses and small towns rise from the landscape, their buildings designed to reflect heat during long summers. Along the Adriatic Coast, places like Polignano a Mare perch dramatically above clear water, its old town balanced on cliffs cut by sea caves. Narrow streets open suddenly onto viewpoints overlooking the coastline. Inland, the town of Alberobello is known for its clusters of trulli, small limestone houses with conical roofs that give the area an almost storybook appearance. Apulia feels open and grounded, shaped by agriculture, sunlight, and proximity to the sea. Tourism exists here, but daily life still dominates the rhythm of the region. As the journey turns north along the Adriatic, the landscape gradually shifts again toward busier cities, university towns, and the culinary heart of northern Italy. As the road turns north from Apulia, the Adriatic shoreline unfolds in long, bright stretches of beach and fishing towns that feel deeply tied to the sea. In Bari, the old town sits on a small peninsula, its narrow streets forming a maze of archways and courtyards. Residents still make pasta by hand outside their homes, laying it out to dry on wooden trays. Along the waterfront promenade, fishing boats rock gently in the harbor, while locals gather in the evening to walk, talk, and watch the light fade over the water. Further north, Trani centers around a pale stone cathedral that stands almost at the edge of the sea. Its reflection shimmers in the harbor, surrounded by small boats and cafes that fill as the sun sets. Crossing into the region of Molise, the coastline becomes quieter and less visited. Inland, towns seek refuge on hilltops and amongst the stone. The Church of San Silvestro in Bagnoli del Trigno, a 13th century Romanesque Gothic structure with its distinct onion-shaped bell tower, sits wedged between two massive limestone rock spurs. Like Molise, the inland villages in Abruzzo also occupy the high ground. But nearer the coast, places like Ortona combine hilltop views with access to the sea, offering wide panoramas of coastline and countryside. Further north still, Ancona rises on a hillside overlooking one of the Adriatic's largest ports, while towns such as Senigallia stretch along long arcs of sand known as velvet beaches. The Adriatic coast feels calmer than Italy's western shoreline, less vertical, more open, shaped by fishing traditions and long summer days by the water. Eventually, the road turns inland toward one of Italy's great university cities. Bologna appears suddenly after miles of flat countryside, its red rooftops and brick towers rising above the plains. The city is defined by its porticos, miles of covered walkways that line the streets, protecting pedestrians from rain and summer heat. These arches create a sense of continuity, guiding you through the city without interruption. At the center, Piazza Maggiore opens wide, framed by historic buildings, and the massive Basilica of San Petronio. Students gather on the steps, musicians perform, and daily life unfolds in a steady rhythm. Bologna is home to the University of Bologna, founded in the 11th century and still active today. The presence of students keeps the city energetic year-round, filling cafes, bookstores, and late-night gathering spots. Climb the Asinelli Tower, and the city reveals itself in full. Red roofs stretching outward, church domes rising above them, countryside visible in the distance. Bologna feels lived in and authentic, less focused on spectacle and more on daily rhythm. From here, the journey continues toward water once again, but this time, a city built directly on it. Approaching Venice, the landscape becomes almost entirely water. Cars disappear at the city's edge. Movement shifts to boats, water taxis, and walking. Venice spreads across more than 100 small islands connected by bridges, its canals functioning as streets. Buildings rise directly from the water, their foundations hidden below the surface. In St. Mark's Square, the scale opens dramatically. St. Mark's Basilica glows with mosaics and domes, while the Doge's palace reflects the power the city once held as a maritime republic. Gondolas move slowly through narrow canals, passing beneath small stone bridges and beside weathered facades. Laundry hangs above the water. Deliveries arrive by boat. Even emergency services travel by canal. Away from the main routes, quieter neighborhoods reveal everyday life. Small squares where children play, neighborhood bakeries, workshops producing traditional crafts. At sunset, the lagoon reflects the sky in soft tones of pink and gold. The sound of water against stone replaces the noise of traffic found in most cities. Venice feels suspended in time, shaped entirely by its relationship with the sea. North of Venice, the flat landscape gradually gives way to foothills, and then to mountains that rise abruptly from the valleys. The Dolomites look different from other alpine ranges. Their pale limestone faces catch the light in a way that makes the peaks appear almost luminous. especially in the early morning and late evening. At sunrise, the rock turns soft shades of pink and orange before settling back into gray. Villages sit in open valleys between the mountains, their church steeples rising above clusters of wooden chalets. Window boxes overflow with flowers in warmer months, while snow blankets rooftops in winter. Roads wind steadily upward through forests of pine and larch, opening suddenly onto wide meadows surrounded by towering walls of stone. In places like Cortina d'Ampezzo, the atmosphere blends Italian and Austrian influences, visible in architecture, food, and language. Small cafes face pedestrian streets where visitors pause to take in the surrounding peaks. Lakes appear unexpectedly along the roads. Lago di Brais sits in a quiet basin beneath steep mountains, its water reflecting the cliff so clearly that the boundary between land and reflection nearly disappears. The air feels cooler and sharper here, carrying the scent of trees and stone rather than salt water. Sound travels differently as well, softened by distance and absorbed by the landscape. As the road descends toward the plains, the mountains gradually recede in the rearview mirror, replaced by cities and cultivated land. Milan emerges as a contrast to the quiet of the mountains, a city of movement, industry, and modern life. Wide avenues replace winding roads. Trams move steadily through traffic. Glass storefronts and historic facades stand side by side. At the center, the intricate white marble of the Milan Cathedral rises in elaborate detail, its spires visible from blocks away. Inside the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II, sunlight filters through a glass ceiling onto mosaic floors, connecting the cathedral square to the famous La Scala. The space feels grand, yet functional, part of everyday movement through the city. North of Milan, the landscape softens again as it approaches the lakes at the base of the Alps. Lake Como winds through steep mountainsides, its shoreline dotted with villages, gardens, and historic villas. Ferries move slowly between towns such as Bellagio and Varenna, connecting communities that face one another across the water. Further east, Lake Garda stretches wider, its southern shores lined with olive trees, and its northern end framed by mountains. Towns like Sirmione extend onto narrow peninsulas, their castles and harbors visible from afar. The lakes reflect both sky and mountains, changing color throughout the day as the light shifts. The pace here slows again, shaped by water and the landscape. West of the lakes, the road bends toward the coast in one of Italy's historic maritime cities. Genoa spreads along a narrow strip of land between mountains and sea, its harbor long serving as a gateway for trade and exploration. The historic center forms one of the largest medieval old towns in Europe, a dense network of narrow alleys known as carughi. These passageways open suddenly into small squares, churches, or views of the harbor. Palaces line streets, such as the Via Garibaldi, where wealthy families once built grand residences to display their influence. Many of these buildings now house museums, their interiors filled with art and ornate decoration. Down at the waterfront, the port of Genoa remains active, blending historic docks with modern facilities. Ships depart regularly, continuing a maritime tradition that stretches back centuries. Food reflects the region's connection to the sea and surrounding hills. Markets sell fresh seafood, herbs, and the ingredients used to prepare pesto, a sauce that originated here and remains closely tied to local cuisine. The city rises steeply from the harbor into hillsides layered with apartments and fortifications. Elevators and funiculars connect lower streets to higher neighborhoods, revealing wide views of the coastline. Genoa feels grounded in its past as a seafaring republic, while continuing to function as a working port city. South along the coast, cliffs and colorful villages begin to appear again, signaling the approach to one of Italy's most recognizable landscapes. The coastline becomes steeper and more rugged, and 5 villages appear along the cliffs of the Cinque Terre. Each town has its own character, shaped by geography and history. Monterosso al Mare is the largest and the only one with a long sandy beach. A seaside promenade runs along the water, lined with hotels and restaurants. The old town sits at one end, with narrow streets leading inland toward terraced hillsides planted with vineyards and lemon trees. Just south, Vernazza curves around a small natural harbor. Colorful buildings form a tight semicircle facing the water, and a church stands at the edge of the rocks. Fishing boats rest in the harbor, and small squares fill gradually as the day moves toward evening. Cornelia sits higher than the others, perched on a promontory above the sea. There is no direct harbor here. Instead, a long staircase leads from the train station up to the village. From the top, vineyards stretch across the hills, and the coastline unfolds in both directions. Pianarola, houses rise in layers above a small boat launch. The village faces west, making it a place where people gather along the rocks to watch the sunset. Lights begin to appear in the windows as the sky darkens, reflecting softly in the water below. Further south, Rio Maggiore extends along a steep valley that opens to the sea. Tall, narrow buildings line the main street, their facades painted in warm tones. Boats are pulled onto a small ramp near the water, emphasizing the town's long connection to fishing. Together, the 5 villages feel both unified and distinct, linked by geography, yet shaped by their individual settings along the cliffs. Beyond them, the road turns inland toward one of the most influential cities in European history, Florence. Florence sits along the Arno River, its skyline defined by terracotta roofs and the massive dome of the Florence Cathedral. This was the center of the Renaissance, where art, science, and architecture advanced in ways that shaped the modern world. Museums and churches hold works created during that period, while workshops continue traditions of craftsmanship that began centuries ago. Cross the Ponte Vecchio, and the city reveals quieter streets, filled with small shops and neighborhood cafes. In the evening, people gather in open squares, and the sound of conversation carries through the warm air. Beyond the city, Tuscany unfolds in rolling hills patterned with vineyards, olive groves, and cypress-lined roads. Farmhouses sit on ridges overlooking patchwork fields that change color with the seasons. Medieval towns rise from hilltops across the landscape. Siena centers around a fan-shaped square that slopes gently toward its medieval town hall. San Gimignano is known for its cluster of stone towers, visible from miles away. The pace here feels tied to agriculture and tradition. Harvests, markets, long meals shared outdoors. As the journey continues south, the countryside gradually flattens, and familiar landmarks begin to reappear. They say all roads lead to Rome, and here we are. Approaching Rome again, the dome of St. Peter's Basilica becomes visible from miles away, rising above the skyline. The city feels different now, not because it has changed, but because the journey has expanded everything around it. From the cliffs of the Amalfi Coast to the volcanic landscapes of Sicily, from Adriatic fishing towns to alpine valleys and Renaissance cities. Each region revealed a different side of the country. Back in Rome, the streets feel familiar. Cafes hum with conversation. Fountains continue to flow as they have for centuries. Evening light settles across stone buildings and ancient ruins. Italy reveals itself gradually, region by region, layer by layer. Traveling through it feels less like moving across a single country, and more like passing through a series of distinct worlds connected by history, culture, and landscape. And in the end, returning to Rome completes the circle. A journey through the place that shaped so much of what came after. Thank you for watching. If you like this journey through Italy and would like to see more travel documentaries like this, click like and subscribe.